G'day to all you lovely people and welcome back to my channel. I'm Kathy and today I want to talk about this. Fated by Benedict Jacka, the first book in the Alex Verus series. I think that's right. Probably not. One of my subscribers, Andrew, thank you Andrew, recommended that I try the Alex Verus series because apparently it is similar in style to the Dresden Files, which he knows I'm a big fan of. And I finished it just a few days ago, so I thought I would share my thoughts with you on the first book in the series, Fated. Let's start off with the world that this book takes place in. It is modern day Camden, London. I don't know Camden, but apparently it is a well-known and well-loved area in London. The character Alex Verus owns a shop called the Arcana Emporium. Alex himself also has a magical ability, and we learn that in London there is a council of mages. There appear to be two factions, the white mages and dark mages, who basically use different kinds of magical skills and seem to have a different philosophy. It doesn't necessarily mean that the white mages are the good mages and the dark are evil. No, my impression was that the dark mages are simply amoral. Really, that they don't consider morality an issue. It is survival of the strongest, the fittest. As for the white mages, I'm not exactly sure where they stand. They're not necessarily better than the dark mages, they're just different. And perhaps they do have more of a sense of morality than the dark mages do. Alex himself, however, is not part of either faction. His skills are quite different. They are not destructive forces as such. He is a diviner, a seer who can predict the future, who can view the numerous paths that events may follow depending upon what actions a person takes or not. And that is a very rough summary of his abilities. The plot involves a magical artifact of great power that both the white mages and the dark mages want to get their hands on. This artifact is locked away in a statue of an old mage, long dead, and it is apparently warded very heavily as well as protected by an elemental, which is a magical creature. A young woman, Luna, who is, I think, a friend of Alex's, who seems to have some minor magical ability, finds a magical cube which concerns her, so she brings it to Alex to look at. And it appears that the cube has some connection to this powerful artifact that the two mage factions are looking to retrieve. And that is how Alex is drawn into this, power play between the two factions. Since I don't want to give away any spoilers, that is all I'm going to say about the plot. So let's talk about Jacka's writing style. I really liked it, actually. I think he is a good writer. It is clean, it is relatively sharp, and I really liked his descriptive prose in particular in describing Camden. I felt this place came alive for me, even though I don't know this area at all. I also liked the dialogue. It was realistic, I thought. It was spare where it needed to be, but I did find sometimes there was perhaps a little too much exposition. I don't even know if I can call that a criticism, however, because this is the first book in a series. So we are playing catch up, trying to find out what is this world, who inhabits this world, what are these factions like, why are there factions? So perhaps that was necessary, but for me, I like a little bit more mystery. For example, we learn a lot about Alex's backstory which I thought might have been more intriguing if some details had been left out. My understanding is that this is not the first book Jacka has written, but it is the first adult fantasy book. I thought it was very well written compared to some things I've been reading recently. The pacing is also excellent. This was one I flew through. It wasn't one that I thought, oh, come on, let's get to the interesting parts. It was well paced. I thought so. The plot itself was not very complex. I didn't think so anyway. I thought it was relatively predictable, but that isn't necessarily a criticism either. A plot doesn't have to be too convoluted for me to enjoy it. This was more a story about this world that Jacka is creating, about some of the players in this world, and to show us who the character of Alex Verus is. So let's now talk about the characterizations. I'm actually having difficulty deciding who Alex Verus is. My impression is that Alex is angry, definitely, aloof, cold, arrogant, and ruthless. That is all I can really say I took away from this book. Given that this is the first book introducing this character, I don't expect to understand him completely, not in one book. I'm sure that I'll learn so much more in future books, and I believe that there are perhaps 10 already in the Alex Verus series. I'm still not sure if he is a good guy or a bad guy, or morally ambiguous. I think he might be morally ambiguous. I don't have any issues with that. I just need to know more about his motivations, and I think we just got a slight taste of it in this book, and I need to learn more about what drives him, because I'm not too sure just yet. He seems more to have been caught up in events, being pulled and pushed between these two factions. The character of Luna. I have read a few reviews that people didn't like this character. They thought she was an insipid or weak character. I actually don't agree with that. Luna is a character who is very isolated and alone due to a curse that she inherited from her ancestors. From my understanding, the way this curse works is that any bad luck that most of us do suffer at times, say having an accident, will be passed on to people close by instead. As a result, she can't even touch people, because then they will suffer some bad luck, whatever it is. And the closer she is to someone, the more bad luck they will suffer. Which means she can't have that human contact, which we all need. I didn't think of her as weak. I just thought that she was lonely and isolated. I found that she did have a backbone. She wasn't a weak character. She was simply trying to come to terms with how to deal with this curse. And perhaps she was even depressed. I don't know. I'm actually interested to see where her character is going to go in the future. Alex and Luna are the two main characters. There are, of course, other characters in the book that we meet, like Rachel and Cinder. Always made me laugh because I used to have a cat that I called Cinders. There's also Morden, I think, and Levistus, which is a white mage. But we don't see a lot of Levistus and Morden, who seem to be some of the most powerful mages. One is a white mage, one is a dark mage. I got a sense of these characters. I understood their motivations, power, but that is really as much as we really know about these characters. I thought that Jacka did enough to give me an impression of these characters, but not a deep understanding. And that's okay. Usually it takes a bit more than one book to give you a very deep understanding of the characters. However, given that this is written in the first person, I would have expected to understand Alex a little bit better. Let's talk about Jacka's world, which is built in this book. There are several magical creatures that we meet. One is an air elemental called Seabreeze, who I thought was adorable. And then we have Arachnus. I loved Arachnus, and that's all I'm going to say. I particularly loved the scene between her and Luna. As for the rest, that involves this council and the two factions, the white and dark mages. It's very early on. This is the first book. I thought it was a good building block to start with, and I'm sure that it will be expanded a lot more in future books. Now I want to talk about the magic in Jacka's world. One of my favorite parts of this book was Alex's skill as a diviner. It was original. I don't think I've seen anything else like it. It's very different to most skills, magical skills that we see in fantasy. We're so used to our magicians, our mages, our wizards having this incredible power. And yet, I think Alex's skill is more powerful than some of these who can draw on raw magic. It's the ability to look into the future, to know to avoid, say, a car accident, for example, or a magical bolt being thrown at you. It really does give Alex an edge, being able to predict possible futures and avoid the dangerous ones or ones where he might die. It was actually very clever to have a mage, Alex, who is not as powerful or not considered as powerful as others. I'm very curious to see how that will play out in other books. The other magical abilities we've seen haven't really been explored at great length yet. Really, it's Alex's abilities that we learn a lot about. How exactly does it work? And I thought Jacka did a brilliant job on that. Okay, now I wanted to talk about what I liked and what I didn't like. I've already mentioned I loved Alex's abilities because I thought it was original. I also really liked Jacka's writing style. I also liked the character of Alex, but I haven't felt really drawn to him. I preferred Luna so far. What else did I like? I like this new world. It's always fun, isn't it? I'm realizing that I do like urban fantasy. Surprisingly, I never thought I did. I usually like classical or medieval fantasy or high fantasy, but I'm actually really enjoying urban fantasy recently. I put that down to loving the Dresden Files. I'm enjoying seeing magic and fantasy taking place in our modern day world. And I thought that Jacka did a good job at introducing this world to us. Would I have liked more? Yes, I won't deny it. I think it could have been fleshed out a little bit more, but for a first book in a new series, I think Jacka did just enough. There were a few things I didn't like about this book. Nothing major though. One is that this book takes place in modern day London, right? We have magicians throwing firebolts, right? In the middle of London. My understanding is that London is one of the most highly surveilled cities in the world. How is it that the authorities don't seem to be aware that people are throwing magical firebolts around their city? It didn't ring true for me. If you are going to place a fantasy in the modern day world, then you need to address that. How regular normals would react to seeing magic. And yet that wasn't addressed at all in this book. And I thought it lacked for that. The other thing that bothered me was that we have dark mages, for example, who keep people as slaves. Why would they remain slaves? How can slavery because that's what it is, continue in London without the authorities being called in? How does the magical world deal with the authorities? Now, I'm not saying that these things don't happen. I know that there are genuine cases where people have been kept as slaves, but it's not a common thing. And yet, well, people can be tortured and kept as slaves in the 21st century without them going to the authorities. Why wouldn't they? That needs to be addressed, definitely, for me to be able to suspend my disbelief that it is possible that the events in this book could take place in my world, in our world. Another criticism I have is the plot, I felt, could have been perhaps a little bit more complex. I didn't find the ending satisfactory. I didn't think that the way Alex got out of it at the end was realistic. It's not that I hated the ending, it just didn't ring true for me. I do need to mention something. Initially, my impression was that this was far too much like the Dresden Files. The characters were far too alike, but that impression faded as I got further into the book. It didn't take me long to realise that they're quite different characters. Yes, there might be some similarities, but not that many that you feel you're reading the Dresden Files again. It's a different world, and Alex's skills in particular is what sets the two apart. In addition to which, I feel that Alex's character might be more morally ambiguous than Harry Dresden is. There is also a lovely homage to Harry Dresden. The author put something in to the effect that Alex isn't the only magician or mage who has a public profile. There is also a wizard in Chicago who advertises in the yellow pages. I love that, I must admit. In summary, do I recommend Fated? I do. I really enjoyed it. Did I love it? No, but I really liked it. I can see so much potential in this character, in this world, and I'm intrigued enough that I want to read more in the series. And I'm also more forgiving of a first book in a series, because I know that it is hard to establish a world and characters in one book, particularly when they're a relatively small book compared to others. If you are a fan of urban fantasy, if you like characters that could be morally grey or morally ambiguous, if you like the Dresden Files, then I think you will definitely enjoy Fated. For a score, I'm tough, I know. I think I'm going to give this a 5 to 5.5. I'm leaving room for improvement with future books. I am definitely going to read a few more in this series. I haven't yet decided if I'm going to buy all of them, but I've got a few on order and they should be coming soon. Let me know if you have read Fated and what your thoughts are on it. You know, I would love to hear your opinions on it. And you can put it down in the comments or you can contact me on Instagram. I wanted to review this book because I haven't seen all that many on YouTube. I know there's always a lot of written reviews, but not many on YouTube. And I'm really curious to see if people know of Benedict Jacka's series. Well, that's all I have for you guys today. Thank you very much for watching this review. And if you liked it, you can do the usual. You can like, comment, and subscribe if you haven't already. I hope you all have a beautiful day, and I will see you next time. Bye.